That's a stalker. Oh Lord, it won't leave me alone, bro. It won't leave me alone. Like, damn, dude, find something to do with your life. Stop following me. What did I do? Oh, do nothing with that, yo. Oh God,
You see, people between a high crime and a misdemeanor, even if the white media doesn't. Claims are from at least one white media outlet that Biden and Trump are neck and neck nationwide. Well, first of all, Hillary Clinton had a majority of the popular vote in 2016, and Trump still won because of the Electoral College. And last time I checked, the Electoral College hasn't been abolished. And secondly, this stuff about Trump and Biden being neck and neck, that's what the white media said in 2016 about Trump and Hillary. The white media is always trying to make presidential elections out to be some sort of horse race. Even when it's blatantly obvious who's going to win, they do it because it's good for ratings. All right, that was my rather long-winded introduction, just to give you a proper grounding for why it is that Donald Trump is out in the Bronx, of all places, trying to get black votes. That's because of the fact that when you're leading in at least 5 of the most important battleground states, and when you're only 9 points behind sleepy Joe Biden, yeah, campaigning heavy in New York seems to be something you might want to do, especially if you can carve away just enough black voters, not a majority, but just enough where you hurt Biden. If you can cut into Biden's numbers, then yeah, you can pick up New York too. Donald Trump may seem to be crazy to some people, but when you look at what the results are, especially in the polls, he seems to be crazy like a fox. Now, why is he hanging around with rappers these days? Well, it's because Diamond and Silk aren't out there mammying for him, so he's gotten these two goofballs to do it instead. He has these two black men show up to a presidential rally dressed like they just came out of a trap house. Now, is this awkward as hell? Of course it is, and it's clearly put together by white people who don't know the first thing about black people and who harbor open contempt for us. When I saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was Kamala Harris dancing to Cardi B. But this story by the Aryan propagandist, it starts off basically attacking these black men. That seems to be the main thing that the story's interested in, saying that the rappers have cases against them. But apparently the orange man sees something different in them. And at least one of the rappers at that rally has 11 million listeners on Spotify. You know, that's a whole lot of people, if they can actually be bothered to put down the blunt and get off the couch, who could be voters, especially young people. Because that's obviously who Trump thinks he's going to be reaching. This is how we're going to reach the young people. We're going to get some of these pot-smoking rappers. They know how to talk to these young people. They know how to talk to them. That's what Trump's thinking. And while the white media is perplexed, Trump is hobnobbing with two black men. The white media's response is basically, well, isn't he bothered about what his white racist base is going to think of this? Well, when you look at that crowd that was there, it was overwhelmingly non-black, so I think it's safe to say Trump's white base is well aware of who he's hobnobbing with, because they were there. He's in the Bronx, supposed to be trying to appeal to so-called people of color, and he winds up with a lot of white people there. But even if that wasn't the case, Trump still wouldn't be sweating it, because as he himself said, he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and his voters would still vote for him regardless. So this is not going to endanger his standing with his base. As long as he's not making any promises to do anything for black people, his base won't revolt. And indeed, he didn't promise anything. He understands the importance of imagery. Trump was there to see if he could slice into Biden's black support. Not merely to see if he could find some snowball's chance of actually gaining a few black votes. He might get some black votes, but it won't be enough to bridge that 9-point gap. But if he can dampen Biden's black support in New York, that would be enough to bridge that 9-point gap and probably even turn it into a 1 or 2 point lead for himself. Now, the white media spent a great deal of column space talking about these two rappers that Trump had with them, basically saying that the prosecutors have them dead to rights. They seem more interested in justifying the charges against those two men than they were with discussing whether or not Trump might actually be able to appeal to some black voters, or at least dampen or reduce some of Biden's black voter enthusiasm. The Aryan propagandists also decided that they were going to take a quote from Richie Torres, of all people. Now, for those of you who don't know, Richie Torres is the LGBT immigrant who happens to represent the Bronx in Congress. And he said, the conflation of communities of color with criminality is a racist trope that Donald Trump repeats. And now, while I do agree that that's certainly the well that Trump is drawing from, the problem happens to be Joe Biden is no different and no better. Every time he talks to the black community, it's all about criminal justice reform. Nothing about putting money in our pockets. It's all about, well, you black people are in jail, so I know that's the only thing you care about. Apparently, the Aryan propagandists and other corners of the white media think that if they just make enough of a stink about the racial contrivance of having these two black rappers who have some criminal cases against them standing with Trump, who also has criminal cases against them, they think that apparently that's going to turn off black voters. When the reality is, Trump's entire ability to weather these kind of accusations comes precisely from the fact that Trump doesn't even put up a pretense that he's something other than what he is. He's an elderly white bigot who may or may not have money, and he's not merely out of touch with black people, but he harbors all kinds of open stereotypes and resentment against us, and he doesn't pretend otherwise. Compare that to Joe Biden, on the other hand, who is an elderly white bigot who may or may not have gotten money due to business connections he and his son cultivated. He also harbors all kinds of stereotypes and phony resentment against black people, except the difference is Biden does pretend as if he's different than that. Biden spent decades passing legislation specifically aimed at harming the black community, and he was the one who said that if we don't know whether or not we ought to vote for him, then we're not black. See, that was Biden trying to do his own version of Trump's black people are living in hell, what do you got to lose routine. Trump can get away with that because he's upfront and unapologetic about his racism. Sure, it's not going to endear him to black voters, but black voters will recognize that at least this is an honest racist, which puts him ahead of Biden, who tries to pretend as if he's not racist at all. Now, this is not to say that black people should support Trump. I'm certainly not. But it is to give illumination to why it is that regardless of Donald Trump's asinine antics, you still got a number of black people who will lean in his direction, at least sympathetically, if not necessarily electorally, because as far as they're concerned, better an honest enemy than a false friend. While I'm not backing Biden, I can't back Trump either, though, because he's not any different. So for the GOP plants and shills who I see on Twitter or in my comments section who say, this is why I'm voting for Trump, hey, genius, what the hell are you voting for? What did he say that he's going to do? And those two stoners on that stage, they weren't demanding anything for their vote either. Well, we're not going to go back to playing the same old game for anyone. Trump is not an alternative to Biden because he's not trying to be an alternative. And let's be clear, the decision that black voters need to stay home on election day isn't being done because we want to help Trump. It's being done because we're putting pressure on the mostly white leftists who depend on the Democrats being in power for their own wherewithal. This is about changing the frame. That's what this is about. Democrats are willing to bring up the legislative racism the GOP has pushed, but only if they can use it during an election year to get black people to the polls. And even then, Democrats have made it clear they're not going to do anything about it. As an issue, they see it as nothing more than just bait to lure black people out to vote, and that's it. The Democrats have as much contempt for black people as the Republicans, so when we see Trump with his antics out in the Bronx, it becomes a wash. You got Jasmine Crockett's spitball fight with Marjorie Taylor Greene getting tons of white media attention, but Jasmine Crockett is just another social climber. For God's sake, when you do an interview with her and she has pictures of herself alone, not with anyone, but just standing alone on the wall behind her, that's how you know this woman is a narcissist. In reality, Jasmine Crockett has more in common with Marjorie Greene in that they're both shamelessly self-promoting. Every one of Marjorie Greene's public attention whoring stunts are meant to increase her own profile and to help her get more money from Republican donors. And the same thing goes for Jasmine Crockett. She's playing the same game. She starts these mindless spitball fights with the Republicans, just like Kamala Harris did before her when she was in the Senate, trying to raise her own profile for a presidential run. And both of them are trying to imitate Barack Obama, successfully turning his arguments with W's cabinet members into a presidential campaign. He was able to do it successfully. He would start mindless arguments with these guys just so he could get himself into the news cycle. And he did it enough times until he raised his profile to the point where he thought that he had a political platform that he could run on, and he did it successfully. But he didn't do anything for black people at all. When an oppressed group is trying merely to survive inside of an oppressive society, resistance tends to be cyclical. There are times when the fight against the oppression is intense and direct, and there's other times when a critical mass of the oppressed decide to resign themselves to being stepped on, at least for a while. And it is these periods of resignation that prompt so many in the dominant society to claim, well, race relations are so much better now. Things have improved so much. We've made so much progress. Not because there's been actual progress, but because black people have, at least for a while, stepped back from fighting for their rights, fighting for their power, to the extent that it can't be ignored. But the reality is, even during the periods of resignation, we never truly accept our condition. And truth be told, we never will. See, that's a reality that neither Trump nor Biden are willing to accept. Getting out there and playing the game, sure, you'll find a few hand-picked Negroes who will be willing to shuck and jive in front of the camera for you. But what you're not going to find is a majority of black people who are going to decide to go for either Biden or Trump simply because of the words that they say. We're entering an era of action now. You're going to have to show us what you've done. You can go ahead and get a couple of front lackeys to be your front men, like that chump I was telling you about on MSNBC the other day. But that doesn't move the needle. Only results move the needle. You can go ahead and have a couple of rappers out there. That'll be a cute PR stunt. And while that just might be enough for Trump to eke out some minor skin of his teeth victory in New York State, what it won't do is stop black people from making the demands that we've been making. This is the new normal. And the shills and plants and bootlicks and suck-ups who call themselves thinking that they're going to be running some sort of online get out the vote effort, we're not listening to you at all. Because sure, Trump may have his own legal problems, and he may think to himself that he's scoring points with black people by hobnobbing with rappers who have also had a brush with the law. But the reality is that as long as you're not actually offering anything to black people, that is the biggest crime of all. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Ginger Vine, Andre Evans, Esfio Dingaswayo, Kenneth Prescia, and Plasticizer. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and...
There ain't shit you can offer except reparations. But you're not gonna offer reparations. Oh God, there goes... Okay. Oh my God, son. And go 911. Riding around, watching for our lives. You know they ain't gonna never watching out for commerce, property. Oh God, let me get up. Y'all know what time it is, man. These white folks don't care about us. They got their little gatekeepers, people they could use, just like Trump's trying to use. 38 felonies, and you damn near had to use all the money you had to be able to get yourself legal representatives, and in cash they needed that money, and you weren't able to bring what you say you have. Nobody wanted to give you loans or nothing. He's going down, so all of you people who come to support him, you can forget it. He might not be going to jail right away, but he's going to jail. Trap God, kill the testimonies. Damn haters. subscribe to my channel. That's all I need y'all to do. That's it. Just press subscribe. On.